"You're too old for birthday gifts," my parents said. Then my sister opened a new iPhone in front of me and whispered, "They said you wouldn't mind." I still remember the way her voice sounded, almost apologetic, almost smug. We were sitting at the dining table. Penelope had just torn off the wrapping paper, revealing the sleek new iPhone 15. The kind of gift you don't just pick up on a whim. The kind that's planned, thought out, expensive. She leaned in, smiled sheepishly, and said it, "They said you were too old for gifts. That you wouldn't mind." I laughed. A short, breathless kind of laugh. The kind you let out when the alternative is crying in front of your family like you're 12 again. That was the moment everything shifted for me. My name's Rachel. I turned 31 last October. I'm the oldest of two daughters, raised in the suburbs of Westchester County, New York. If you know the area, you know what kind of families live there: high-functioning, image-conscious, and quietly competitive. Growing up, I was the dependable daughter. The rule follower. Good grades, summer jobs, early scholarships. My parents, Martin and Yvonne, had high standards, and I tried desperately to meet them. I didn't mind doing things on my own. I liked being capable. But I think somewhere along the way, they started to expect me to handle everything on my own. When Penelope was born, I was 13. Old enough to babysit. Old enough to help with bottles, diapers, and school drop-offs. I was always mature for my age, people said. And sure, I liked being seen as responsible. But as the years went on, that turned into being forgotten. The gap between us wasn't just age. It was attention, affection, energy, resources. She was everything I wasn't: bubbly, sweet, artistic. She was the baby they parented differently. And I was the kid they had already figured out. I left home at 18 for Rutgers, and from then on, I was basically on my own. I worked through college, lived off campus, and visited home only a few times a year. When I did, it was clear that Penelope was the centerpiece of the household. Framed dance recital photos, handmade birthday banners, inside jokes. I would sit at the dinner table and feel like a distant cousin. Still, I never said anything. I didn't want to come across as bitter. I kept telling myself that being self-sufficient was something to be proud of. Maybe it was better this way. I didn't expect much anymore. But I guess I still expected something. Which is why, when Penelope called me a few weeks before our birthdays and suggested we celebrate together, I was surprised, and cautiously hopeful. She sounded genuinely excited. "You haven't been home in forever. It could be fun. We could have dinner, open gifts together like we used to." I didn't remind her that the last time we opened gifts together, I was 22, and my parents gave me a Hallmark card with a $20 Target gift card inside, while Penelope got a MacBook for starting high school. I said yes anyway. I drove up on a Friday, planning to stay for the weekend. The house hadn't changed. Still perfectly manicured. Still museum quiet. My mom gave me a brisk hug when I arrived, and my dad greeted me with his usual "Hey, kiddo." Penelope, though, ran up and hugged me tight. "You're here. You still use that same tote bag?" she laughed, pointing at my beat-up canvas weekender. She'd always had a weird affection for my older, lived-in stuff. We had Chinese takeout that night. Talked about her college applications. She had just been accepted to Fordham, and my parents were so proud. I tried not to flinch when they said they'd be covering most of her tuition. That night, I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time they said they were proud of me. I couldn't. The next morning, my dad made waffles. The table was set with mimosas, fresh strawberries, and cloth napkins. It felt festive. Then came the gift. My dad disappeared into the other room and came back with a box, wrapped in matte white paper with a gold ribbon. Penelope squealed and unwrapped it quickly. "Oh my God," she said, lifting the phone from the box. "It's the Pro Max." She jumped up to hug them both, nearly knocking over her glass. My mom beamed. My dad looked satisfied. Then Penelope turned to me, lowered her voice, and said it. They said you were too old for gifts. That you wouldn't mind. She meant well, I think. Maybe. But it hit me like a slap. I didn't say anything. I didn't cause a scene. I just smiled weakly and got up from the table. On the porch, I stared out at the lawn and listened to the birds. Tried to breathe. Later that day, Penelope came out to check on me. She sat next to me, cradling her new phone, thumbs flying across the screen. You okay? She asked. I'm fine, I lied. She nodded, not pushing. That night, I packed my bag early. The next day, I left before breakfast. I told them I had an early work call. When I got back to my apartment in Jersey City, I opened my laptop and wrote an email to my parents. Not an angry one. Just honest. I told them how I felt growing up. How I watched them light up at every little thing Penelope did, while I was expected to be the adult in the room. I told them it wasn't about the phone. It was about the message. That I had aged out of mattering. I told them I wasn't okay. It took 2 days to get a response. My mom replied, Rachel, we're sorry if we made you feel overlooked. We always saw you as strong and independent. Maybe we didn't realize that could still come with hurt. We'll try to do better. That was it. I didn't respond to the email right away. I wasn't sure what to say. I'd written it in a haze, emotions that had been simmering for over a decade had finally boiled over, and now that they were out there, I felt drained. I kept rereading her line, we always saw you as strong and independent. That was the problem, wasn't it? Being the strong one meant I had to be okay with less. Being independent meant I wasn't supposed to need anything. Not help, not comfort, not even acknowledgement. After that weekend, something in me quietly broke. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stopped trying to be included. Penelope texted a few times that week, photos of her with the phone, pictures of her new dorm room at Fordham, a TikTok she thought was funny. I responded with short, polite replies. I could tell she noticed. A few days later, she called me out of the blue. You're being weird, she said, with her usual bluntness. I was on my lunch break at work, walking along the Hudson. The wind was cold, and I didn't really want to talk. I'm just tired, I said. You barely said anything since the weekend. I took a breath. It's been a long few weeks. And I'm still kind of hurt. There was silence on the line. Then she said, I didn't mean to rub it in. I know. I really thought they'd do something for you, too. They told me not to mention the phone, but I thought it was weird to just pretend. I leaned against the railing, staring across the water at Manhattan. You didn't do anything wrong, Penny. This isn't about you. Isn't it, though? That caught me off guard. I think they expect you not to need anything from them anymore, she said. They've been doing that since I was a kid. You were always the one who didn't complain. So I guess they just stopped asking what you needed. She wasn't wrong. When Penelope and I talked like that, really talked, I remembered why I'd always protected her. She wasn't trying to be favored. She just grew up in a different version of our family than I did. They didn't even ask what I wanted for my birthday, I said finally. They just assumed I'd be fine with nothing. Did you want something? I laughed bitterly. Not a phone. Just the gesture. A card. A hey, we thought of you. Anything. More silence. I get it, she said, quieter this time. I'll talk to them. I didn't ask her to. I didn't want her stuck in the middle. But some part of me was relieved she offered. The following weekend, I got a card in the mail. It was postmarked from home. The handwriting on the envelope was my dad's. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a store-bought birthday card. Generic. The kind you could buy at CVS the night before. but he'd written something. "We've always been proud of you. Maybe we didn't say it enough. That's on us. You've done everything on your own, and we thought that meant we didn't need to step in. But we see you. We love you. Dad." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I'd wanted 10 years ago. But it was something. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, did he send that because he meant it? Or because Penelope had said something? Part of me wanted to call and ask. Another part of me didn't want to know the answer. Instead, I put the card in the fridge. Not as forgiveness, but as evidence. That maybe, just maybe, something had shifted. A couple of weeks went by. Life went back to its routine: work, laundry, solo dinners. The usual. Penelope came to visit me one Saturday. She brought bagels from a bakery in the Bronx and a 6-pack of hard cider. She was growing into herself, learning how to be her own person apart from our parents. We talked about school, her classes, and her new roommate. She asked me about work, and I told her about a project I'd been leading. For once, it felt like we were equals, not big sister and little sister, but two women trying to figure out their lives. "I told them they screwed up," she said casually, as she scrolled through photos on her phone. I raised an eyebrow. "What did they say?" "They got defensive at first. Then they got quiet. I think it's hard for them to see you as someone who could be hurt. Like that's not part of your identity." I scoffed. "That's because they decided I'm the one who doesn't need anything." She nodded. "Well, they're wrong." We sat on the floor of my tiny living room, eating cold sesame bagels and sipping cider from mismatched mugs. It was the first time in a long time I felt seen. Not just by her, but by myself. The weeks rolled into months, and the memory of that weekend stayed with me, like an echo I couldn't quite shut out. It wasn't loud, but it was constant, subtle reminders of what had been said, what had been implied, and what had been ignored. I stopped reaching out to my parents as much. Our texts became strictly informational. I'd get the occasional forwarded article from my mom about something happening in Jersey City, a passive attempt at connection. My dad would occasionally like my photos on Instagram, never comment, never message, just the thumbs up emoji of fatherly distance. Penelope and I, though, grew closer. I started to see her less as the symbol of my resentment and more as someone else trying to exist in a family that had quietly assigned each of us roles. She was still the favorite, but she had her own pressure to carry, expectations to be cheerful, affectionate, the glue that held things together. One evening in March, she called me crying. "I failed my midterm," she said, voice shaking. "I've never failed at anything." I sat down on my couch, phone pressed to my ear. "Okay. That absorb. But it's not the end of the world." I told Mom and Dad, and they didn't even care. They just said, "We're not worried about you. You'll bounce back." It was like a switch flipped in my brain. I'd heard that line before. Over and over. "You're smart. You're capable. You'll figure it out." They said it like praise, but really, it was a permission slip. A way to emotionally disengage. "Welcome to the club," I muttered. She sniffled. "Is this how you felt all the time?" "Yeah," I said. "But I didn't realize it until I saw how different it was for you." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she said, "That's not fair." "No. It's not." We talked for over an hour that night. Not just about school or parents, but about childhood. About what we both remembered, and what the other had missed. I told her about the year I didn't get a birthday cake. She told me how guilty she'd felt getting things she didn't ask for, knowing I didn't get the same. "It's like we lived in the same house," she said, "but two totally different lives." A few weeks later, my dad texted me out of nowhere. "Coming into the city for a conference. Have time for lunch?" I stared at the screen for a full minute. We hadn't had a one-on-one meal in over 5 years. Not since the time he drove down to help me move apartments and left halfway through because something came up. I texted back, sure. Thursday works. 1 p.m.? We met at a small Italian place near my office. He wore his usual navy blazer and khakis, like he was heading to a country club rather than a business seminar. I wore flats and a cardigan, my compromise between professional and comfortable. He ordered a Cobb salad. I ordered penne arrabbiata. There was small talk at first: how's work, how's the apartment, what's rent like these days? I answered politely but without detail. Halfway through the meal, he said, your sister told us you were really upset. About the birthday thing. I paused, fork in midair. Yeah. I was. He shifted in his seat, looking vaguely uncomfortable. We didn't mean anything by it. We figured. You've got your own life now. You're doing well. I am, I said. But that doesn't mean I don't still want to feel like your daughter. He looked down at his plate. I guess we thought needing less from us was a sign of strength. It is. But strength doesn't mean I don't have feelings. He nodded slowly. That's fair. I didn't expect a grand apology. I didn't get one. But I did get something close to acknowledgement. And that mattered more than I expected. Before we left, he said, next year, I promise we'll do better. I'm not keeping score, I said. But I'll remember that. The next few months brought quiet shifts. My mother started calling every few weeks. Not to talk about Penelope, but to ask about me. How work was going. What I was reading. Whether I was dating anyone. It still felt a little forced, but at least it was something. When my birthday rolled around again, I didn't plan on doing anything special. Just dinner with a couple of friends and maybe a solo movie night. But that morning, a package showed up at my door. It wasn't wrapped, just a box from a local bookstore in the city. Inside was a handwritten note: saw this on a list of your favorite authors. Thought it might be a nice birthday read. Love, Mom. The book was a signed hardcover. One I'd casually mentioned liking in a social post months ago. It wasn't an iPhone. It wasn't a grand gesture. But it was specific. Thoughtful. Intentional. Penelope called later that evening. Did you get Mom's gift? Yeah, I said. Was that your idea? Nope. All her. We sat in silence for a moment, both letting that land. Maybe they're trying, she said. Maybe, I said. But I'm not building my expectations around it anymore. Since then, things haven't been perfect. My relationship with my parents is still strained. There are still moments when I feel the same old frustration rising. When I hear them gush over Penelope's latest performance or her internship while skipping over my promotions or milestones. But I'm learning not to internalize that silence. Not to equate quiet with indifference. Not to assume love always looks like celebration. Sometimes, love is messy. Sometimes it's delayed. Sometimes, it wears a disguise so familiar, you forget to question it. Penelope and I still talk every week. We text memes, vent about work, send photos of dinner like we're neighbors instead of sisters living 20 miles apart. For the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm carrying our relationship alone. I'm not over it, not the years of being overlooked, not the countless birthdays that passed like any other day. But I'm no longer pretending it didn't happen. And strangely, that feels more healing than any apology could. It's strange how healing can look like slow, quiet steps. How it can come not with fireworks or grand forgiveness, but with silent resolve. I didn't get the apology I imagined in my 20s, the one where my parents realized everything they did wrong, fell to their knees, and promised to be better. That never came. But I did get something better, a sense of power that wasn't handed to me, but something I took back for myself. It started small. Penelope kept visiting, sometimes staying for the weekend. My apartment became a kind of halfway house between the life she was given and the life she was beginning to build on her own. She started asking questions about money, boundaries, and how to say no. I watched her unlearn a lot of the same things I'd had to navigate alone. One night after dinner, she told me our mom had been subtly freaking out. She said you've been distant lately. That she feels like you're punishing them. I raised an eyebrow. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just choosing not to play the same role anymore. Penelope grinned. That's exactly what I told her. I think it really threw her. Good. I never planned a grand revenge. I didn't need to. People like my parents thrive on image, the idea that they've raised perfect children, that they have perfect family dinners, that birthdays come with carefully curated photos and captioned gratitude. But perfection is a fragile thing when it isn't real. And I'd stopped playing my part. When Penelope's graduation came around, she asked if I would help her plan a small party in the city, just close friends, no extended family. I said yes, and we made it happen. She wore a thrifted dress and brought her own cake. We rented out a rooftop patio at a friend's building and invited exactly no one from our parents' social circle. My parents, of course, were invited. But they weren't the center of attention. They stood awkwardly at the edge of the group, holding plastic cups of white wine while Penelope toasted to the people who showed up for me in real ways. She looked right at me when she said it. It was subtle. But they knew. The real satisfaction came months later, when my mother called in a panic. It was around Thanksgiving, and she had just learned that Penelope had declined to come home for the holidays. Instead, she'd made plans to stay with me and a few of her college friends. She didn't even ask us, my mother said, her voice brittle. She just decided. She's an adult, I replied calmly. She's allowed to choose where she feels most comfortable. My mother went silent. I knew she was trying to figure out if this was retaliation. If I'd turned her youngest daughter against her. But the truth was, I didn't have to. I'd simply stopped covering for them. Stopped cushioning their failures with my silence. Stopped telling Penelope that things were okay when they weren't. She figured the rest out herself. By the time Christmas rolled around, I had my own plans. I booked a solo trip to Edinburgh, a city I'd always wanted to visit. Cozy pubs, misty mornings, and cobblestone streets. I didn't invite anyone. I didn't explain. I just went. I posted a few photos. A warm cup of mulled wine. A bookstore lined with old hardcovers. A quiet selfie, smiling by a firelit cafe window. The comments poured in. Penelope, you look so happy. Blackheart, a friend from work. Vibe equals immaculate. My mother, wish we could have been together this year. We miss you. I didn't reply. Let them sit with that. But the true moment, the one that sealed it, came about 6 months later. I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from a woman I hadn't spoken to in years. A family friend who used to attend our holiday parties. She said, I ran into your parents at a fundraiser. Your mom kept going on about how close you and Penelope are now, and how proud they are of both of you. Said you're this successful, independent woman in the city and that you've grown into someone who inspires your sister. Just thought you'd want to know. I read it twice. They were rewriting history now, polishing their version of events. They weren't the parents who forgot birthdays and favored one child. No, they were now the ones who raised two strong, successful women. Who had a hand in all of it. I could have been angry. But instead, I smiled. Let them have their story. Because the real one? The one that mattered? That belonged to me. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was built on boundaries. On choices. On refusing to shrink myself to make others comfortable. On letting my absence be noticed, instead of my presence being taken for granted. I stopped chasing the love I thought I needed. And in doing so, I found something better. Self-respect. Peace. Power. And maybe, just maybe, that's the best kind of revenge there is.